about $45 million. They evaluated the cost of getting it out of there and then moving it a couple feet over to the right and securing it there. And that cost, I think, about $250 million. And then fully excavating and shipping it to a licensed facility, which is what should be done. And surprise, it's the most expensive thing to do because it's the right thing to do, is about $500 million. So this happened and was finalized in 2011, early 2012. This is kind of a big deal. EPA should have been here talking to the community about what happened, but it wasn't. So we did a little legal research here, and there are two ways the EPA performs actions at Superfund sites. And I'm sorry I don't have all this up here. I've had some computer issues lately. Is that if it's a removal, that's kind of like an emergency action, and there's an imminent public health threat. And in that case, no public engagement is required under Superfund. On the other hand, we just had the EPA tell us during the government shutdown that the work at this landfill was non-essential because there was no risk to the public or health. And so what we found, and this is under the option, we believe, of non-essential, because the EPA just told us it was non-essential, even though I'm sure pretty much all of us in this room think otherwise, is that before the adoption of any plan for remedial action to be undertaken by the President, by a state, or by any other person, the President, in this case being the Environmental Protection Agency, because that's under his direction, under a handful of sections, as appropriate, shall take both of the following actions: publish a notice and brief analysis of the proposed plan and make such plan available to the public, which again the EPA has authorized this gamma cone penetration test that they're going to be starting, but that's not the digging. It's still looking that over. And number two is that it should provide a reasonable opportunity for submission of written and oral comments and an opportunity for a public meeting at or near the facility at issue regarding the proposed plan and regarding any proposed findings under section 9621D4 of this title relating to the cleanup standards. The President or the state shall keep a transcript of the meeting and make such transcript available to the public. So this trench is going to be excavated without any public engagement, without any public comment, without any request for public comment from the EPA. Again, because of the government shutdown, we haven't been able to talk to them for 2.5, 3 weeks. So this is going to be us talking to them when we send this in. Is we want to have a public meeting before you start digging. It's in the law. You have to do it. And we want it, right? And so I got a phone call from DNR after a guy there talked to EPA, and the plan right now is for on-site training to begin October 28th. On October 29th, they're going to begin the vegetation clearing. That should take 7 to 10 days, 5-day work weeks, and then the gamma cone penetration testing will take place 12 to 15 days. I wrote it down on my hand, so this might not all be right. I didn't have a piece of paper right around here. What's the training for? It's probably going to be how to properly clear the vegetation.
I would venture to guess it's like familiarization, because people coming in have never been here.
Yeah, so it'll be, this is where that is, don't go there.
There's bad training or somewhere too.
And again, this was a brief telephone call that I had today, and transcribed what's on here from my hand. So this is the latest update that we have. We'll probably have something more formal than this tomorrow, so keep your eyes peeled. Next. Also, tell your friends, bring a friend to the next meeting, bring a family member. This next meeting is November 21, 2013, in this room, at the same, unless we have an emergency meeting, which I don't really think is going to happen, but stay tuned. So mark that down, tell your friends, tell your family, get them here. all the reporters in the room. That's when we'll be having our next meeting. And then there's a few things that you can do next if you want to go. Call your federally elected officials. This is significantly important. The sign-on letter that you have here is asking for two things. Support the removal of the radioactive wastes and put the Army Corps of Engineers in charge. And that's what we think is appropriate. And
no trench.
And no trench. Or start at the trench and go north. And then do Area 2. So then you can do some other stuff. If you go to the next slide. This one's up here. So refusing to give up. We heard that in the prayer today. And if you're feeling weary, keep moving on. Like I said, encourage your neighbors. Call your agencies. One thing that I think that anyone who's within smelling distance of this landfill should do after you're finished logging your odor on the DNR or coalition entry form, call your elected official. Call your state elected official, call your state rep, call your state senator, call your congressperson, call both of your senators, call your governor, and let them know that you can smell it right now and that you need their help. And speaking of costing people money, I'm glad that Lynn's here. He posted on Facebook the other day that the smell was so bad and the weather had just gotten cooler that he couldn't keep his windows open at night. His house was 80 degrees. He had to turn on the air conditioning when it was 55 degrees outside just to keep his house cool because of how awful the odor was. He lives in Spanish Village. So talking about costing people money, right there. That's money that's going to the utility that could have been in his pocket, and it's happening all over the place. So, you know, I feel for the airport and them not wanting to lose money, but people here around this landfill are already losing money. So let people know that you're losing money, and maybe that'll light a fire under their butt. No. I think that's it. So, yeah, we'll open it up for questions. I know that there's several elected officials here too. So, yeah, Lynn.
Don't you think we need to add Mr. Coster to that list of calls?
Add who? Coster?
Coster.
Yeah.
He's the one who makes the deal with them. And May, I do remember that press conference he put out that we're going to relocate people due to the nuisance smell. Well, don't you think that this is infinity times worse than a nuisance smell?
Yeah,
Don't you think he needs to go in and relocate these people that are in there?
I couldn't agree with you more, man.
I mean, I think he needs to be called since he's the one who is negotiating with them. And I make my plea out to every elected official here in Matt Levanchi to please pass that on to Mr. Coster.
Yes, thank you for saying that, Lynn. Please do call Attorney General Coster. He's already running for governor. He's already going to want your vote. So make sure that he does what you want to, right?
Ed, one thing we didn't discuss, you talked about the brush hog, but I'm a little concerned about that power washer. It's going to be cool days now. Power washers are generally heated. They put a whole lot of stuff in the air, and the wind normally blows from west to east. Spanish Village is just a little bit east of there. I got a problem with the power washer. I said they could bury that damn equipment in a hole like they did those tractor trailers. If they need to dig a hole, they can come take my property and dig a deep hole and bury it all right there. Let them do it in a hurry. I don't want a power washer with no coverage and that stuff going in the air and blowing right to my neighborhood.
Well, amen. You know, and again, this, you know, if you have any concerns, because we're reading a lot of stuff.
We said that to every official we possibly could and never got a response. The best we got is they're out of the office.
Well, make sure you tell us too.
Can you tell everybody what the power washer's about, please?
Decontaminating the equipment after it's used.
This is not a good practice.
It's going to be used on equipment that's already contaminated.
Yeah.
Like how they wash the garbage trucks out at Waggy.
Yeah, but seriously, if anybody has any issue with what you're reading, you can email me. You can email the Coalition for the Environment. We'll try and make sure that it shows up in these letters that we're sending. You know, you know, at the last meeting we had, we told you all about the fact that the Coalition finally got a meeting with the Attorney General's office. Well, we went and came back, but in between our last meeting and this one, all of these triggers and everything that we learned about this entire summer went out the window because Republic agreed with the Attorney General to dig this trench, get rid of the triggers, and cap the north quarry. So I don't know the political motivation for that or the rationale, but what I will say is, you know, send us information that you're getting that you want shared up the ladder, because you talked to us about putting permanent air monitoring in Spanish Village. That came up in our meeting with the Attorney General.
Thank you.
So, you know, when you tell us this information, we pass it along. So just make sure you keep it coming.
Kay may mention at one time about not just a cover like this, but something that she knew about on other sites that had negative pressure that would not allow this. Do you remember that?
It's an inflatable structure like that. You have to have significant pressure. Yeah, it's kind of the same technology. You guys remember the inflatable building at the Science Center? It's that kind of technology.
It keeps the gases in and the dust. Is that what you're talking about, the temporary building?
Yeah.
Yes. So if you don't have one of these guys, this has phone numbers on it to call these people. And it also has how to get the odor log, so you can hand this to people who have odor issues, who don't make it to these meetings, but are out when they smell things. So, you know, let's pass these around and make sure you have those numbers handy in your fridge.
Have we heard anything about what they're going to do with the material in the trench if that?
We still don't have that plan. That's the second phase.
What was the question?
The question was, do we know what's going to happen to the material that is excavated in the trench?
If they do the trench?
Yeah, and the answer to that is we don't have, as far as I know, the details for that. EPA is looking it over. They had a couple of weeks off. I wish I could have a couple of weeks off and get back there, but that's neither here nor there. We don't know that. And if it's, like I said, as soon as I find out, I'll let the Coldwater Creek and Illinois folks.
The testing that they're doing in OU1, that they're planning to brush for, do we know what that testing entails, like what they're testing for and how they're testing?
Yeah, that plan has been laid out in detail. It's on the DNR website. There have been several back and forths from the original plan to comments that the DNR had, the Department of Health and Senior Services, EPA, and then several more letters have gone back and forth discussing what ought to be done. So it's a gamma scan. They're not looking for alpha or beta. Generally, I guess gamma is an indicator of where that might be, but it's not as comprehensive as we would like. And so we have a few experts looking at that, and we hope to have something else.
Is that similar to the plane flyover? Like
No.
Equipment to go over something?
They actually go in the ground.
They're going in the ground. Okay, so they're going to have to disturb it to test it.
Yeah. So.
That would be part of it.
All right. Yeah. Question.
Can I ask a question of any fire official here? As far as the fire itself, I used to help install fire suppression systems for like data centers with halon and FMK and carbon dioxide. Is there any way that the fire itself could be flushed with carbon dioxide to both cool it and maybe remove oxygen from it to slow the spread of the fire? Yeah, I would think that you would be able to tap a pipe down there and at least get close to the area to pump carbon dioxide in and cut off oxygen to the fire.
Yep.
The proposal of injecting an inert gas or cooling gas into the landfill has been on the table since basically we got involved with it. Todd has it in his report, and that's available to everybody. It's all that information is on the website. Todd was getting through the DNR was not getting anywhere with that idea. The meetings that I sat in on, Republic Services, professional engineering firms have said that the injection of that gas into the landfill will not have a broad enough cone of influence at the depths that we're looking at. They went further to say that there's no history anywhere in the country where injection deeper than 25 feet has been effective. The thing that I find funny about it, and one of the things that I've been talking to Todd this past week about, is that I think it brings that plan back to the table based on these documents that were discovered over the weekend. And the reason that is because 20 years ago, when they had that fire that they pointed out on that wall, SCS engineering firm, who is currently the engineering firm for Republic, they were hired by Laidlaw at the time. That was their plan to put that fire out, was to inject the landfill. So those documents, and that's one of the things that I was referring to with Todd being upset that these documents that have been in possession of the DNR but had not been provided to him. It definitely brings the argument for gas injection back to the table, especially when their own engineering firm 20 years ago recommended that that's how they would handle it.
I've seen these systems be effective for areas the size of a football field. And they may use gases that are more expensive, like FMK and halon, but they're plain old vanilla carbon dioxide,
right?
Which is, if I understand it correctly, it's heavier than air. So if you find where the hot spot is and inject it over it, it will sink.
I agree 100% with what you're saying. What the argument back on that topic is that trash and waste is so compacted at the 120 foot, 150 foot level that if they put a pipe in there with a nozzle, however they engineer how to get it down there, that it's only going to stay in the pipe. So I hear what you're saying. I completely agree with you. You know, that if there's gases that are coming out of the landfill and there's more pressure on the gas being put into the landfill, it's going to find that same mechanism of travel that the gas is coming out.
And what's the rough estimate of the temperature at which it's smoldering now? Does anybody have a rough idea to say it?
The temperature right now when it's smoldering at, we've seen temperatures up to close to 300 degrees. The other thing that I did find out on the fire that they had 20 years ago, those temperatures in that area were about 800 degrees.
Whoa. Okay, and what, as a fireman, do you have a feel for what temperature the process would be slowed or essentially come to a stop? If you're there's between 300 and...
Yeah, in a lot of these meetings I've emphasized it's not necessarily the temperature or is a magic number where we see smoldering events continue to occur. It's the oxygen level. And you know, with the cap going in place, that's definitely a step in the right direction as far as we're concerned, because they can no longer overdraw their gas system and pull oxygen through the ground into that heated area, therefore heating it up more, causing more of a fire. But yeah, there's not a magic number. That's according to Todd, because I'm not a landfill fire expert, he is, and I rely on his information. Usually at around 160 to 170 degrees, you know you have an issue, especially if you see carbon monoxide being produced and oxygen levels going up. It's more the temperature that's what's watched. There's 4 or 5 different components of what are coming out of those gas extraction wells that indicate what type of fire and where it's at.
And they're saying they can't get to 150 to 150 feet below ground.
That's what they are saying.
I find that ludicrous. But
I would agree with you.
And doesn't
Thank you,
Todd,
sir.
doesn't Todd have backup, because he's done this before?
Yes,
in other
Todd has
locations,
used injection
so
in other facilities.
At depths.
At depths that haven't been at the depths of what we're talking about with this facility.
But still deeper than 25 feet.
Deeper than 25 feet, correct.
How do you keep the oxygen when you dig a trench and get into the fire?
Well, and I'm glad you asked that question. Because the issue is, if we dug a trench right where the fire's at, then you're obviously exposing oxygen at ambient air measurements to a fire. And that's all it takes to cause a smoldering event become a a flaming event. Where the trench is going in, the oxygen that is induced to the landfill at that point is not at a concern because the smoldering event is still so far away. It's not like once you open the cap and allow it to go through the dirt that's there, that oxygen isn't going to rush to the seat of where that smoldering event is. And I will go on record to tell you that Todd is in favor of putting the barrier wall in place, just as the fire department has called for a long time. We're still in favor of that happening because we feel that is the one measure that can safeguard, no matter what happens, whether or not the radioactive material is removed. And I'll tell you this, it's not going to happen overnight. The safeguard that's there, and even if those plans and the Corps of Engineer comes in and they decide, yeah, we need to remove it, that wall still needs to go in place because we don't know how long it's going to take for that fire to get from one side of the landfill to the radioactive material. So we will always stand behind that barrier wall. We need a solution to keep the fire from the radioactive material.
Real quick, Matt, before you step down, I talked earlier that all the substances that are in the landfill that aren't radioactive, some of those are extremely volatile, and as they're digging into the soup of God knows what are you guys looking at in terms of an accident over there, in terms of spontaneous combustion? I mean, what kind of alerts?
I'm aware of the reports, some of the reports that were discovered over the weekend that reference some of this stuff. We have requested documentation to back that up. That has not been given to us, so we cannot comment on what that possibly will be at this time.
Matt, if I could, I'm Fire Chief Terry Lohr. I just want to follow up on that. What Matt said about our official position with this wall goes hand in hand with what I heard over here, if it is done safely. We cannot judge, we cannot be the judge of that wall being put in safely with that new information that just came out. The Corps of Engineers, who has to advise the EPA, are the experts in that regard. It's very tough. I mean, what you've got to understand from us from a fire department standpoint, we're like the peons. We are a jurisdiction having authority for fire protection and hazmat mitigation in this area. And Matt has done a tremendous job. And I will say this, people don't realize this. More than probably 60 to 70% of what Matt is doing currently every week on the job is related to this. We got to run a fire department. So you can see, and Matt's not the only one tied up to this. We've got a community affairs, governmental affairs officer that's working with the higher levels of the federal government, Claire McCaskill's office. He's got probably 20% of his job into this landfill. So you got to know from our perspective, we're all in on this just like you guys are all in on it. The one thing I was going to bring up as well, if we get the ability to get some of these national, get an example with the Corps of Engineer folks that would be willing to teleconference this group and answer questions. We've just recently remodeled our administrative headquarters and probably could see easily probably 3 times this group with video conferencing technology. So if you would ever want to use that.
Yeah, just so everybody in this community knows, our commitment is still to the health and safety of this community. And when we see that being infringed upon, we will stand up and fight for this community.
Thank you. So I just wanted to touch on a few things before we wrap up. One is some of the requests that were made by the folks who live in Spanish Village, which is the site closest to this. And that is, we're going to make calls and ask them not to use the brush hog, right? You're going to go home and make that call? How many people here are going to make a call? I want a few more. Okay. And then the other issue was relocation during the trench digging. That issue needs to be considered. We need to raise that issue. How many people are willing to stand up for the people in your community and help argue that they do not need to be exposed during that excavation?
Sure. Not considered.
What about all the people that work over there?
The workers
are
are
like right next door to it now.
Oh, you mean the employees in our city?
And the folks in the trailer park.
Yeah,
They're
well,
closer.
they also need to be relocated. Well, who wants to cover over that during the work? Everybody, right?
Big time.
Anybody opposed to covering this stuff up?
Oh, no.
Okay, so we, as a community, we're agreed that we want this thing dealt with as safely as possible, and we have some very specific asks, which means we're not going to blindly sit by and let them do what they're going to do without making sure that they hear from us and that they listen. And we're going to need our elected officials and our fire officials' assistance in making sure that our concerns are not dismissed, and that the safety of our children and our homes and our property are not disregarded. Okay? The motto of this room that we're in, and the local 513, is labor conquers all, which happens to be the state motto of the state of Oklahoma, where I'm from, but it also happens to be a really good description for what's ahead of us as a community. We have to work together. All of us, because we are all here. We have family here, we have property here, we have friends here. Those of us that don't live here have come to appreciate and love the people who live here. And we understand the hardships and the pain that people have already suffered and continue to suffer, and the risks that they face going forward, and the amazing courage that it's taking to get up every day in their homes. So we will stand together, all of us, and we will demand safety, and we will demand security. Okay? The next little project that we have to do, we're working on getting an answer out of our federal electeds to agree to support removal of the radioactive waste. So we're doing video postcards, so if you want to do one, come up and fill this out, and we'll take your picture, and then we're going to get them to social media outlets for our elected officials. So they won't just be getting letters from us with a name on a paper, but they'll be seeing the faces of the people in the community that do this. And we're going to be doing this activity on Sunday at the Healthy Planet Fair in Webster Groves. If you want to be there, you can come help with that project and join us for our video postcard project. In the meantime, the next meeting is November 21st. It's a week before Thanksgiving. Many of you will be busy planning on dinner and giant fried turkeys and pies and all that. But take the time the week before Thanksgiving to come here and be thankful for your community members who are fighting for you.
Yes.
And do what you can fighting for them. The next prayer vigil is next Wednesday, 10 o'clock.
Yes, 10 o'clock at the vacant lot.
Same bad place, same bad time. For those of you who don't know, the Franciscan Sisters have been leading a prayer vigil at the old Cadillac Jack site on St. Charles Rock Road. We do need to address this issue with Earth City employees. Lou Lucy, can you help with that issue?
What issue?
The issue of Earth City employees being exposed during the trenching and those concerns, we're hearing those. And we need to make sure that other people hear those concerns. We know people who work at Hussman. How many people here know people who work at Hussman? We have concerns about their safety. So those are all issues. And the gentleman here with the experience with the landfill inert gases idea back here in the back row, I think you should join our technical committee, and I'm going to invite you to do that because I think your perspective would be helpful. Anybody else, if you have an area of knowledge or expertise that you can bring to the table, or just a willingness to dig through documents, then we invite you to come and stand and do what you can. We're going to do what we can with what we have, and we're going to work every day. And I thank you all for taking time out tonight. I thank you for being the people that you are, the community that you are, and bringing the strength and the courage to this. And we'll see you in November.